Hello, good morning. I'm Ian Nemerov, and I'm happy to be presenting here for Minibar. And so I'm here to talk about negotiation, something called, my title is, Does My ZOPA Look Too Big to You? And we'll get into that as we go through the presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone. Thank you to the people from Minibar for their help getting me lined up for the presentation this morning. So there's a few components to my presentation today. The first part you might want to call knowing me, knowing you. And as Goethe would say, and this relates to negotiation very clearly, know thyself. If I knew myself, I'd run away. And in today's presentation, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about why I am talking about negotiation, and then talk about why knowing yourself is very important when you are in negotiations. So here's a little, partial bio of me and what I've done and the types of deals I've negotiated. I've been working from home for a long time now as a solo attorney. Every day is take your dog to work day. I'm sure everyone's getting used to that now. I was a general counsel for some public companies in the technology field, as well as medical diagnostic software, coming out of a couple of interesting IPOs. I've been through exits, I've been through dispositions, I've been through M&As. I've negotiated hundreds, if not thousands, of contracts with large institutions, major hospitals, a lot of deals with preeminent medical professionals, and buying stuff. And I've negotiated a lot of disputes and matters with various government agencies. And so now there's my contact information at the bottom, Ian@nemerovlaw.com. And by the way, don't worry if you call me Ian. I've been getting that for a while. And there's my phone number. If you want to contact me, talk about negotiation or anything else, I'm happy to talk. So, but the more important than that, than who I am, is who are you? And who is the type of person that you're negotiating with, or the actual person you're negotiating with? You really want to know this. And there's a lot of different definitions out there about the types of personae that you may run into, that you may be when you're negotiating. Here, just for sake of discussion, I've laid out three different types. You have your analyst, your accommodator, and your assertive. And you probably can already think of some people that that fit into each of these categories. There's good and bad qualities of each. None of these categories are necessarily better or worse than another, but it's helpful to be aware of what you are and understand what the person you're negotiating with is. An analyst is someone who's realistic. They like to focus on the data. They're prepared. They're smart, but they might be kind of cold and not very warm and emotional. They might take time. They might be slower to decide that this is someone I want to work with. They want to figure it out. They're into relationships. They're not the kind of person that just demonstrates disregard for the relationship, but sometimes their slowness and their calculated they're perceived to have a calculated manner that can actually be irritating to other people. And so you need to be aware of that you may not be if you're an analyst, you may not be intending to harm the relationship, but just your method of getting data, which is very good. It's good to have data, and we'll come back to that a little bit later, can put people off. So the worst match is the assertive, and the assertive is down below, and they're very direct and they want to move and they want to dominate the conversation. The analyst, if you're negotiating with an analyst, they want time to think. They want to figure it out. They want to go from A to B to C and understand why they're moving to each step. If you're negotiating with them, or if you're an analyst, show that, figure out while you're working on collecting your data, continue to show the other side that you still want, that getting the deal done is important. That this isn't an academic exercise to figure out a science project or to figure out who is smarter or better understands it. Show them that you are really trying to get the deal done. That will help. Now, an accommodator is a different kind of negotiator. An accommodator is very friendly, very personable. They're conversational. They're going to talk about all kinds of stuff that might not be related to the deal, and you might even be wondering, why am I talking about all this? I just want to get the deal done. They want to build a relationship with you. They're not going to focus on the details. If you're an analyst, for example, you might be frustrated with an accommodator because they might be talking at a higher level or a more abstract level than you want to talk detail. But an accommodator, they might talk a lot. They might talk about their family, their vacations. They might want to find out about your favorite vacation or your dog. Or the other thing an accommodator may do, they may say yes a lot. They may overpromise. They may, and I've seen this a lot, and you've probably seen this too, both when you're on the sales end and on the buying end. Accommodators might sometimes tell the customer, yes, we can do that. Or the customer, you may come in as a salesperson, you may come in and be selling certain things, and maybe you're starting with what you consider to be your high offer to see if they bite, and they say, yes, absolutely. The problem with that is sometimes when the salesperson overpromises, when you get into the delivery side, even though the salesperson intends to do everything they can to make the customer happy, sometimes when you overpromise, of course, you can't deliver it, and then the customer gets a bad impression of your organization. Similarly, if you're selling to an accommodator and they agree with what they just accept. Oh yeah, I love you and I love what you're offering. You end up sometimes having a lot of chaff down the road when when there's other people in the organization or up the ladder from the person you're dealing with that slow your deal down or create new obstacles or say, well, you're gonna have to do more to really get our deal, and you think you have a deal. The accommodator is really focused on the relationship more than the details. A bad match for an accommodator actually can be another accommodator where they're both just agreeing to everything. Then you end up the day with not really knowing. You come back to each of your respective organizations and nobody really knows what the deal is. Causes stress internally, and then it causes stress for both parties when they have to go back and figure it out. If you're negotiating with an accommodator, watch their tone. Because they're relationship-based people, they may not let you know when they're unhappy with you verbally. But if their tone changes, or if they start, for example, they start getting quiet or short with their language, they may actually not be happy. They may not want to tell you they're not happy, but their tone may be maybe tipping it off. Not saying it necessarily is. You always have to be careful when you're dealing with tone, but figure out how to check, and say, hey, take pause and say, are we still good? Do you still like X? Also, if you're dealing with an accommodator who may be saying yes a lot, and a good idea to make sure you actually have a real deal is to focus on the next steps, the implementation. If you can get into good details about the implementation, and who else needs to approve? Are they approved? What are we going to do when I send my team? And if my team shows up on Monday to put in the system, who's going to be here from your side? What equipment will you have available? What systems? Where are your the technology that we have to interface with? Will it be ready? Obviously you can get into more details about that, but those are ways to find out when you're dealing with an accommodator if you actually have a real deal, if they're just trying to make you feel good. Finally, the third type of persona that you may be negotiating with is an assertive. And this is someone They call it how they see it. They think they're being honest. They just think they're being logical and direct. They may come across as emotional. They get very passionate about the deal. They may be kind of in your face, aggressive. They may be abrupt and interrupt you. They feel like they've talked about it enough and they just want to move forward and they want you to move forward. For as far as relationship goes, they want mutual respect, but they don't really care if they don't really focus on, do you like me or not? They want to know, they might be the kind of person that says something like, well, they didn't like me, but they respected me. And they're going to want to be controlled. If you're dealing with an assertive person, they're kind of tell you how it is. And if you try to tell them how it is, you might not get too far. An analyst sometimes can be a bad match, can be very irritating to an assertive. An analyst is always like, well, hold on, I don't know if I'm there. Let's figure out these facts. And the assertive wants to roll that and actually can get annoyed because they're moving forward and you're just slowing it down by worrying about these details. One trick for negotiating with them, they're moving forward. They want to know, they want to move on. Show them that you understand. Say, I understand that you want X. Now, let me just make sure that I understand this detail here. Sometimes repeating what people say back to them can be very irritating. But with an assertive person, sometimes if you say, look, I'm not trying to negotiate. I'm not trying to disagree or say that this is your position and make you stick by a position. I just want to make sure that I clearly understand what you're saying. And did you say X, Y, Z? If not, let me know how to fix it. And then, if you need to, add a detail. Sometimes that can help them. You've shown them that you understand where they're coming from without agreeing or disagreeing, and you may be able to add some of the details or some of the future steps in there to make sure you say, with that, when you say X, Y, Z, do you mean that next we'll do A, B, C? And you're showing them understanding, you're adding detail, you're actually building credibility that way. Another thing I want to talk about regarding negotiation today is preparation, as Abraham Lincoln said, or at least is reputed to have said, although it may not actually be a true Abraham Lincoln statement. Give me six hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. It's not known whether or not he said that, but it is a good idea when you're negotiating to actually prepare a little bit ahead of time to make sure you're right. There's a lot of worksheets and preparation materials available to you on the internet and through books. I have some books and materials that reference at the end of this. You can look at those or elsewhere that may give you kind of team building, almost not team building, but team preparation worksheets or individual worksheets where you can go through things. Some of the things that you might want to think about are your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you have a small house on a large piece of land, you may have a developer sniffing around and offering to buy it, so they can tear down your house and subdivide your land and build 2 suburban McMansions. And your house, which is assessed value, might be $350,000. They could build 2 houses perhaps on that land with an assessed value each of $800,000 or more. But that might be a complicated deal. On the other hand, you may think that there's someone that may just buy your house as is, that may like it. It's a nice house. And maybe they'll pay $400,000. So the developer may be a difficult negotiation, may require negotiating with the city, and they may need to get financing from a bank, and you may just want to sell, and you may not want to deal with the developer. So your best alternative to negotiate agreement may be just to continue living in the house, or to just sell it to the nice couple that's willing to just buy it as a house? What is your ZOPA? And some people say that in Central Europe that's kind of an insult, but this is your ZOPA is your zone of possible agreement. It's kind of like the, what's the lowest amount you'll accept, the highest amount you think is possible to get, what's the lowest amount the other party's willing to pay, or what's the highest amount they're willing to pay. And those could be, and then your ZOPA is kind of the overlap between their range and your range. And you can get creative here. You have to kind of understand what's, sometimes how to establish value and present your side as well as possible. When Theodore Roosevelt was running for president, his team had his campaign team printed 3 million mailers with his picture on it, and then they realized after they printed the mailers that the picture was owned, the photograph was owned by a photographer, and that photographer had the copyright, and they were worried that at the time, they might have to pay copyright damages. Could have been significant for each of the, even if it was $1, they had 3 million items, so it could have been $3 million, which was a lot of money back in early 1900s. His campaign manager called up the photographer and said, we want to do we want to send some mailers out about Theodore Roosevelt, and how much would you pay for us to use your photo? We saw your photo, it looks nice. Photographer said, I'll give you $250 if you'll use my photo for the publicity. They figured out a very clever way to change the zone of possible agreement. And the other side's best alternative to negotiated agreement. They cast it in terms of a dollar amount to a PR issue, and it was a very clever way to change to shape the negotiation. How can you find advantageous information or positions? Questions. Ask a lot of questions. Find out information. Find out, what's valuable to the other party, what their challenge is, who the other people that need to approve are, what their interests are. And again, use of planning worksheets. When you're negotiating, listening can be your best tool. As Abraham Lincoln said, he would spend 4 hours sharpening the axe and 2 hours to cut. Similarly, if you're listening twice as much as you're talking, if you're asking the right questions and listening to the right things, that in the long run can be very valuable. One thing I see a lot in negotiations, you'll get a contract and people say, let's just start from the top. To the extent that you can figure out how to combine issues, that'd be very beneficial to you. One trap I see a lot of people falling into is starting off with what they consider to be a fair offer. That actually usually, that can work sometimes, but it often rebounds. If they accept your fair offer, you wonder, wow, maybe I could have gotten more. But oftentimes they don't accept your fair offer. In fact, they're a little irritated that you're telling them what fair is. The other side more often than not, is going to be more satisfied if they negotiate you to a fair offer. They're going to wonder what's going on if you present a fair offer. Obviously, there are exceptions. There are situations where presenting a fair offer works. If you're in a relationship with high trust, sometimes presenting a fair offer can be good. If it's not worth it for either side to really negotiate, you just want to move forward, a fair offer can be good. The best questions are questions that involve get people talking. And those questions usually start with why, what, or how. How do you see this happening? What is your most important objective? Why do you want to do this deal? And remember that oftentimes when yes or no questions can be bad, but sometimes no is better than yes. Yes doesn't always mean yes, and no doesn't always mean no. If you've ever watched Succession, there was a great episode when Roman had negotiated a deal and while being kidnapped, and then he's telling his dad about it, and he said, they said yes with his investment banker, and the banker says, "They said yes, Roman." And Roman says, "Yeah, well, sure, they said yes, and maybe it's real, maybe." And he tells his dad, "Dad, I wish it's real. I really," and succession, Roman's lingo, do but. And he heard the yes, but he didn't really think that there was a real deal there, and he thought it was really going to damage their business if they actually relied on that yes. And he probably was right there. Whereas oftentimes when people say no, they don't really mean no, go away. They just mean no, not that, but keep talking. If someone says yes, they almost have now they get internal. They're starting to wonder, did I mean yes? Now they're defending it. So they start getting nervous and they figure out, did I do a wrong deal? If they say no, however, they haven't committed to anything. They haven't kicked you out of the conversation. They're just not defending anything. They're kind of saying, not that, but present something else. They're in control. If someone says yes, now they're nervous. If someone says no, they're in control. One way you can take advantage of that is if you're meeting with someone, you're trying to sell it, say, are you no longer interested in upgrading your compression? That actually may work better because they'll say no, that's not right. As opposed to, do you want to resume our conversation about compression? If they say no to the second question, you're bad. If they say no to the first, you phrase it in such a way, they're saying, well, look, I don't want to stop the conversation, but I don't really know it. But sometimes when you get your other party to say no, you're giving them control, but you're also inviting them to continue the conversation. And then finally, I just have some information that I wanted to share. As Margaret Atwood said, a bit, before I get to Margaret, the more you learn about something, the better off you are. As Margaret Atwood said, ignoring isn't the same as ignorance. You have to work at it. So here's a selection of materials. Most of these are books. Some of these are available on the internet, such as number 1, Chinese Commercial Negotiating Style. I first got that from the Hennepin County Library, but last I checked, that's available on the internet. It was for the U.S., written for the U.S. Foreign Service. It's from 1982, but there's still a lot of good information there. This video by Dan Shapiro from Harvard called "Negotiating the Non-Negotiable." It's from one of his talks at Google. It's available. It's on YouTube. It's very entertaining. Some of these others, are books, and some of them deal with, straight on negotiating, such as Negotiation Genius and Negotiating for Success. And others are more about just how to be a better listener and understand people, such as Influence by Cialdini, which I suspect many of you have read, and Just Listen by Mark Goulston, and Thinking Fast and Slow by the Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. Thinking in Bets from a year or two ago by Annie Duke. Very good for understanding how to deal with things. Well, that's my presentation. I appreciate everyone who participated and is participating in Minibar. I hope you enjoy the rest of Minibar. If you have any questions, please share them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you and have a good day.